Hello everyone, welcome to the 7th round of the Tata Steel Masters tournament in Wijk aan Zee. And it's a fantastic tournament so far, a lot of action and a surprising leader. With 4.5 out of 6, Nodirbek Abdusattorov, the former, sounds very strange to say, the former World Rapid Champion. He's only 18 years old, but he has a tremendous tournament so far with 4.5 out of 6. He is on +3, has won 3 games, 2 with the black pieces against Magnus Carlsen and Richard Rapport. And today he plays with the black pieces against Arjun Erigaisi, very strong, young, talented player from India, but very solid so far with 6 draws. And I was very curious to see what this game has in store for us. Let's have a look. Starts off with a Petrov opening. E4, E5, knight f3, knight f6, and knight takes e5 is a possibility, but I believe that the move d4, it's a very ambitious move, trying to open the center as quickly as you can, and we get a more imbalanced kind of game. Black captures on e4, and now we take on e5. So we have a nice pawn on e5, and well, the knight on e4 is kind of isolated now, so black hurries up here by playing the move d5. And we have a typical pawn structure with white's pawn already on e5 versus pawn on d5. This kind of structures are often seen in 1e4, e5 openings. And generally speaking, black is doing okay here. If he manages to keep the knight on e4, it's taking away quite a number of squares from the white pieces. So white's next move, knight bd2, is very logical. And black decides to trade it off here. There are many other options. Queen d7 is a interesting move. Knight c5 is a possibility. But anyway, let's not go into a theoretical discussion. Let's see what happens in this middle game. Knight takes d2, bishop takes d2, bishop e7, and white puts the bishop on d3. White is slightly ahead in development, has a small space advantage thanks to the pawn on e5. So I like white's opening in general, but black is very solid. His position doesn't contain any serious weaknesses. Black goes c5, so in certain cases black will consider to kick that bishop away with the move c4, but white would like to maintain the bishop on the b1 h7 diagonal, so the move c3 vacates the c2 square for the bishop in case it gets kicked away. So knight c6, castle kingside, bishop g4. Active development by black as well. Consciously postpones the decision to castle, because with this developing move we are pinning the knight and threatening knight takes e5, winning a pawn. For that reason we go rook e1, bringing the rook to the half open file, supporting the pawn on e5. And here Abdusattorov deviates from earlier games, quite a few Grandmaster games. Continued here with the move queen d7, very natural move, connecting the queen with the bishop, controlling the e6 square, and making it more difficult for white to get in a potential pawn push at a certain case. But black castles instead, and that's also a pretty logical move. But Erigaisi tries to make use of the fact that black hasn't placed its queen on d7, plays here the move h3, questioning the bishop. And now of course it would be nice if black would take, we can recapture with the queen. Rooks will be connected, and white with a space advantage and bishop pair has sort of dream position. So black drops back with the bishop to h5, maintaining the pin, and of course we can always consider bishop g6, trying to trade off white's strong bishop on d3. And now the move bishop f5. So here we see that black is not able to put the queen on d7. I thought that would be a nice square for the queen to connect the rooks and to get ready to put a rook on d8 and support the pawn on d5. So why is that so important? Well, I think that that pawn on e5 is quite unpleasant. It restricts black's minor pieces. And for example, moves like f6, trying to undermine that pawn, can always be met by e6. And that will be a very unpleasant passed pawn to deal with in the long run. So black has to find alternative plans and comes up with an surprising move here, I think, for many of us. Plays here the move king h8. So, yeah, not entirely clear what the king is going to do. Maybe in certain cases black would like to play f6 anyway, and then there are never any problems on the b3 ga diagonal. That could be one idea, but for the moment black is also just very solid, and it's up to white to prove he has something here. Queen e2, further strengthening its position, ready to get the rook to d1. And black goes queen b6, attacking the pawn on b2. And that's why white moves the bishop to f4. So the queen on e2 covers that b pawn. And here again another quite mysterious move by black, as I thought that rook a8 is a very natural option, but it was not played by Abdusattorov. He decides to put the rook on e8. And why does he play that move? Well, I think that he is trying to make use of the white queen on the e file. Maybe there are certain tactics with moves like bishop d6 or maybe f6 or bishop f6. In any case, trying to make use of that pawn on e5 being pinned. But soon we will see that the rook is not ideally placed. White goes rook a d1, attacking the pawn on d5. And, well, it would be strange, of course, to go back with the rook to d8 already. So instead, we go here for the move d4. It was played by Abdusattorov, and we get a very sharp middle game, because it looks as if white's position is very impressive. Space advantage, all the minor pieces on the f file. But black is looking for counterplay now. And the idea is that after c takes d4, they would follow knight takes d4, and with an attack on the queen and the bishop, it looks as if white is in some trouble at least. So white's not going to take on d4 right now, and also a pawn break like e6 is not possible here, because there will follow f takes e6, and here we see why the rook is still on f8, basically to anticipate that e6 move, as now there are too many white pieces on the f-file to avoid the loss of material. So white comes up with an alternative plan, very aggressive move, but very understandable. White goes for the move g4, unpinning the knight. And now after bishop to g6, we could, of course, try to exchange the bishops by taking on g6, but probably it's nicer for white to let black capture on f5, so that we can recapture with the pawn, and then this pawn duo can potentially cause some problems for black. Queen c2 played, keeping everything well defended. b2 is defended, the bishop on f5, the e file, the pawn on e5 is well covered by white's pieces as well. And well, black basically says now with his move rook d8 that the rook has done his job on the e file. The queen is no longer there, and let's come back with the rook supporting its main asset, the pawn on d4. So I believe that it's a very sharp position. Like anything can still happen. Probably white is doing quite okay. Maybe a solid move like a3 could be considered, but in such sharp, potentially sharp positions, it's very understandable that white is looking for immediate action. And he plays here the move h4, planning to go h5 and forcing black to take on f5, after which gf5 gives quite a nice pawn duo on e5 and f5. Now Abdusattorov wakes up. He comes up with a very impressive move. The move queen a6. Not an easy move to find at all. Apart from attacking the pawn on a2, the main idea is actually to push the pawn to d3. So let's say white decided to take on d4. We will get there in a second. But if white plays, let's say, a move like a3, there is the move d3, attacking the queen. And look, the pawn on d3, it's 3 times attacked, but it's 3 times defended by black as well. The bishop on g6 covers the pawn on d3 as well. So that's fantastic idea. Like if white moves the queen, then black can create a protected passed pawn, and that's going to be very unpleasant in the long run. It's still a sharp game. White can try to fight, but it's a positional success for black. So instead of a3, white decided to take here on d4, but now also black obtains a passed pawn. And the question is how to deal with it. Probably a move like rook e4, trying to wrap up the pawn on d4 is a reasonable move. It does give black the possibility to take on a2, and white takes on d4 with more or less an even game. I think black is okay. But white plays very ambitiously and believes that the d pawn is not going to be a problem. But he gets it wrong, Erigaisi. He plays queen b3, and now the d pawn comes up the board. It's well supported, as mentioned before. And now trying to wrap up the pawn with a move like rook e4, disconnect the bishop from this pawn, would allow a move like h5. Very sharp move, like white cannot take because the bishop on f5 will be taken. And now very nice tactical resource. After bishop takes g6, there is knight a5 attacking the queen. And if the queen moves, we are going to take with the queen on g6, attacking the rook on e4, as well as the pawn on g4. All of a sudden, white is in trouble. But probably white should have gone for something like that. Erigaisi played h5. Very understandable, very natural sequence of moves. Once you push up the h-pawn, you put a pawn on h5 as well. Bishop takes f5. Only move, gf5. And now another key move, which may have been overlooked by Erigaisi. Knight d4. Fantastic idea, trying to trade off pieces on the king side, removing the defenders. And very important idea here is that white is unable to take on d3 with the queen for tactical reasons, because there's queen takes d3, rook takes d3, knight e2 check, rook takes e2, and then we pick up the rook on d3. Black has won the exchange. White is forced to take on d4. Knight takes d4, rook takes d4. And pawn on d3, well supported. The rook can quickly come over to d8 as well. But who knows, maybe the rook will come to g4 as well. So that's why bishop g3 on the board. The bishop covers the king still, as the g-pawn is going to be missed. But by dropping back to g3, the d-pawn comes closer to its promotion square. d2, attacking the rook on e1. And if you stay on the back rank, there will follow rook d3, rook f d8, and white's pieces are going to be paralyzed. They are forced to defend against the d-pawn, and white is unable to launch an attack any longer. So white plays rook e3, guarding the d3 square. Rook d3 is not possible. And here, the question is, how is black going to break through? The d-pawn is strong. We would love to remove the defender, but in order to do that, we first try to support the d-pawn a bit better. I'd love the move bishop g5, attacking the rook and controlling the pawn. But unfortunately, white will still have queen a3, ignoring the rook on e3, because if black would capture, there is queen takes f8. So that means this is forcing the exchange of queens, and white is in time to meet rook c8, threatening rook c1 with rook c3, and white has chances to survive here still. So instead of bishop g5, queen h6 was played. White got to watch out the h-pawn now. It's a serious weakness. And also, of course, the d pawn. So there are many issues for white here to resolve. In the game, in time trouble, I think already, white decided to take on b7, trying to get the queen back to the king side very, very fast. But it has serious problems. White should have gone for the move rook d3, trying to trade off this very important rook. And the forcing line here is rook takes d3, queen takes d3, and you're about to take on d2. So you go rook d8, and now queen e3, offering the exchange of queens. And there's also rook takes d2 as a possibility, whereas a move like bishop g5 can be met by f4. So queen takes h5, and now rook takes d2. Rook takes d2, queen takes d2. Black captures the pawn on f5. And black is a pawn up, but white can still fight with queen d5, attacking the pawn. If you try to save it, there's queen a8, so that's definitely not recommended, leading to mate. But black will give up the pawn by playing h5, key move, giving a square to the king. And in case white regains the pawn, we put our bishop on c5. A lot of pieces have been exchanged, but in this endgame, white's king is still in trouble, I believe. There are ideas to go with queen g4 and h4, very unpleasant to deal with for white. So instead of rook d3, which is what white should have done, he decided to take, with the idea that after queen takes h5 there is queen f3. But first we go bishop g5, trying to kick the rook away. Rook c3, queen takes h5, threatening the rook. Queen has to come back. But now, of course, we are trying to keep the queens on the board. Queen h3. Very nice move. White would like to offer the exchange of queens. Played here the move bishop h2. But we do give a check. Rook g4. And white went back with the bishop to g3. But if you go king h1, the alternative, black is going to exchange queens. And there is rook e4. And there's nothing you can do against rook to e1. White's rook on f3 is unable to come back in time. This is game over. So bishop g3 back. And now, very interesting move. Black played here the move h6, just securing a square for the king, preparing to get the rook involved somehow. And this is another moment where white could have tried to put up more resistance by playing the move queen h1, forcing the exchange of queens. But I think, black has a choice now. He could go for the exchange of queens and put a rook on e8, for instance. But there's also an interesting exchange sacrifice. Rook takes g3, with the point that after rook takes, we are going to take on f5, and still white is lacking some coordination. The rook is not well placed. There are ideas to get the other rook involved as well. Looks very dangerous for white anyway. But definitely the move played by Erigaisi is another mistake. Queen g2. It doesn't force the exchange of queens, as the queen can come back to h5, keeping an eye on the rook. So rook takes g3 is a huge threat. Discovered attack winning a piece. And, if white would come back with the queen, there's just rook e8, and white is kind of stuck in a position like this. I don't see what white can do here. Rook cannot go away. Black needs to keep everything defended. It's very tricky position when your king is open. But in the game, white played the move f3. He wanted to get rid of that rook on the g file. But it's another weakening move, as we will get to see. Rook comes back to d4, keeping the pawn defended. And now white plays queen h2. It could very well be that Erigaisi had been calculating all this, believing that now the queens will be exchanged, because the black queen cannot really go anywhere. The rook on c3 protects the pawn. There's no chance to take on f3, obviously. But there's bishop h4, very important move. If you trade off the bishops, there is queen takes f5, and you can take the pawn on d2. But after queen takes e5, black is a pawn up, but most importantly, the king is wide open. So there's no chance to trade off the bishops. And in case of rook takes d2, you're just gonna take, and then the bishop is hanging. So white played here king f1, trying to run away with the king. But simple move here, rook fd8. There are other good moves for black as well, but I like the simplicity of this move, just overprotecting the pawn. Bishop f2. And we've got to be precise, yeah? Keep in mind, you cannot take on f2 because of queen takes h5. And this rook on the 4th rank needs to stay there to keep the bishop defended. In case of rook d3, there's queen takes h4. But now, fantastic move. For me, one of the nicest moves of the game. Rook to e4. Great idea. With the point that if you take the rook on e4, there's queen takes d1, king g2, queen g4, and the d-pawn promotes with check on the next move. It's game over. You cannot do that. There are other options. You could take on d2 as well, but then if you take with the rook, f takes e4 now, at least black cannot promote, but there's queen e2, followed by taking on f2. It's going to be game over. White is under tremendous pressure here. There are hardly any good moves. And black has plans of improving its position with rook d5, attacking the pawn on e5 one more time. Possibly even start with king h7, just to avoid any sort of annoying checks on the back rank. White is in huge trouble. I don't see any active move here. He played a desperate move, f6, hoping to generate some counterplay. After gf6, queen h3, I think the idea was that after fe5, he wanted to put a bishop on e3. And the reason why you do it in this order is that now the rook on c3 no longer covers the pawn, but the queen does. And maybe with king e2, you can sort of consolidate your position. I say sort of because the position is still pretty bad for white. In any case, f takes e5 was not played, and a much stronger move was played by Abdusattorov, rook to f4, putting pressure on this pawn, with the idea that that bishop e3 is met by rook takes f3. And another idea is that ef6 is not a problem at all. They will follow queen b5 check. All of a sudden, these pawns have disappeared, and the queen comes over to attack the king. Queen to e2. And it's completely hopeless. The rook is gone. Rook g8 is a threat. There followed, instead of ef6 and bishop e3, the move bishop takes a7, grabbing another pawn. But after queen takes e5, problem is that also a move like rook e3, trying to consolidate the position, because black is about to play queen e1, promoting to a new queen. But after rook e3, you go queen c7, and now the bishop at the other side of the board is just kind of trapped. You can only defend it here with rook a3, but then there's queen c1. That pawn on d2 turns out to be a huge monster. White played bishop e3, keeping the e file and both the e and c file closed, but queen b5 could not have been prevented. It's a check. King goes to g1, and now queen e2 anyway, attacking the rook on d1. White tries to save the game with queen f1 here, but it's too late. There's rook g8, king h1, queen takes f1, rook takes f1, and now the final move of the game, rook takes f3. Fantastic shot with the point that the rook cannot be taken because of d1 queen. And if you go away with the rook somewhere on the first rank, there is rook h3 with checkmate. Beautiful mating pattern with the two rooks on the G and H file. And that means that Abdusattorov moves to 5.5 out of 7. And since his main rivals, Caruana and Giri, only made a draw, Giri made a draw with the black pieces against Aronian. Caruana tried hard against Marsodlu in the queen endgame, but also couldn't convert. He's a full point ahead of these two, as well as Wesley So and Praggnanandhaa. They are all on 4.5 out of 7, 1 point behind Abdusattorov. He is the man of the moment. Can he keep the lead for the next couple of rounds? Would be very interesting to see. There are of course some fantastic pairings still coming up. Let's see what's going to bring the next couple of rounds. See you then. Bye bye.